Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in our series of contemporary Western philosophy. Today, we'll take a look at the philosophy of life movement, which will help us to better understand the philosophers such as Nietzsche and Teilhard de Chardin. So, when you look at the philosophy of life movement as such, we see that it is a way of looking at the world that we see will emphasize life, change, and experience rather than rigid rules, abstract concepts, or pure logic. Now, it emerged as a reaction to traditional, overly intellectual philosophy. And these philosophies, the traditional philosophies, we see that focused too much on theory and not on life experiences. And therefore, this movement, in a way, we see that the life movement values dynamism, it values creativity and inner experience. Now we take a look at vitalism. Now, at one glance, vitalism and philosophy of life may seem like the same thing, since both of them emphasize life. However, they have different histories and meanings. So let's take a look at vitalism first. So vitalism originated as a biological theory that argued that life cannot be fully explained by physical and chemical processes alone. Instead, they said there must be something unique, something like a life force or a soul that makes living things special. Later, we see that vitalism expanded beyond biology and it became a philosophical perspective. And this philosophical perspective sees life as the key to understanding reality. And therefore, it often opposes strict rationalism and believes that reality is not mechanical. It is not just about mechanical laws, but it is something more organic and something that is evolving. Philosophy of life, on the other hand, is much broader and it emerged in reaction to abstract and rigid philosophies, especially those that were dominant in European universities, particularly Hegelianism and Neo-Kantianism. Now, this movement sought to make philosophy more connected to real life. And how did it do this? By emphasizing individual experience, spontaneity, and creativity. Imagine two people trying to understand a tree. Now, a mechanistic philosopher would describe the tree purely in terms of chemical reactions, cell functions, and physical growth process. A vitalist, on the other hand, would argue that this explanation misses something deeper, and it will, in a way, focus on the tree's life force or the inner vitality. A philosophy of life thinker would even go further. He would ask, how do we experience the tree? How does it how does its presence affect us? Or what does it mean to grow and change like the tree? Now let's take a look at some key ideas in the philosophy of life movement. So, first and foremost, we need to look at anti rationalism. So, philosophy of life movement criticizes the idea that everything can be understood through logic and fixed principle. Instead, it in a way values intuition, experience, and action. Dynamism and change. We see that life is always moving and changing. So, philosophy, according to the philosophy of life movement, should focus on growth, evolution, and transformation rather than fixed ideas. And here we see that thinkers like Nietzsche and Bergson emphasize that time, change, and creativity are fundamental to existence. Another main point regarding the philosophy of life movement is personal experience over abstract theory. So instead of analyzing the world through universal logical systems, it in a way prioritizes how individuals experience life personally. So instead of discussing morality in theoretical terms, it asks, how do real people make moral choices in their unique situations? Another important aspect of the philosophy of life movement is emotion and creativity. It says life full of passion, creativity, and unpredictable movements. So instead of seeing life as something that can be categorized, life something that can be put together in different areas, it sees life as unpredictable and also full of passion and creativity. And this is why it connects with art, literature, and even spirituality. And next we see that some thinkers like Bergson and Teilhard de Chardin saw life as deeply connected to God. At the same time, they also emphasized on religious experience. Other thinkers like Nietzsche rejected religion because he believed it weakened the people and made them passive. But even Nietzsche was deeply concerned with human energy, creativity, and freedom. And all these are, in a way, themes that are central to the philosophy of life movement. Now, as a movement, we see that the philosophy of life is not just a school of thought, but it is a way of living and seeing the world. It influences not just philosophy, but also literature, art, politics, and spirituality. Just as existentialism, it is a way of thinking that affects how we live, not just how we theorize. For example, a person influenced by philosophy of life might choose a career based on passion and creativity rather than logic or money. Now, they might believe that life is about experience and not just success or rules. And in this way, we see that the philosophy of life movement is a reaction against rigid intellectual philosophies. Instead of focusing on abstract principles, it emphasizes life, experience, change, and action. Whether through Nietzsche's call for strength and energy, or Bergson's belief in creative evolution, or Teilhard de Chardin's vision of spiritual progress, we see that the philosophy of life movement urges us to see life itself as the key to understanding reality. So that's it for this episode on a brief introduction to the philosophy of life movement. Next time, we'll take a look at the life and philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche.